The original 1990 Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles turns 30 this year. I have very fond memories of seeing that movie in the theater when I was 8 years old. Well, last month I took my 8-year-old son to go see it in the theater as it was reshown for its 30th anniversary, and that kind of kicked off a month of nostalgia where I bought this awesome mask, bought the Last Ronin Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles comic book series, and decided to rewatch all of the movies. So today I'm going to stop and rank all 6 Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movies from the worst to the best. Hi, my name is Sean, and I love to talk about movies way too much. With that in mind, go ahead and join me down below in the comment section. Share your ranking of all 6 theatrically released Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles films. My list isn't the right list, it's just my list, and I would love to see yours. And let's get started. In last place, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 3. I have never liked this movie. From 1990 till 1993, I had the first 2 movies on loop in my house. I watched the cartoon as often as I could. I had the toys, I played the video games. I went to go see this movie opening weekend in the theater, and even as a dumb kid, I did not like this movie, and I never rewatched it until I started this channel. Right off the bat, the Turtles just look weird and wrong. There's a significant redesign between the movies, and the faces are structured a little bit differently, and they're significantly more animated in the face. In theory, that should allow for a better performance, but in practice, it just draws your attention to the fact that you're looking at this highly advanced puppet costume, and it does not look good. Oops! That sort of thing would bug me, but I could easily get over it if there was a compelling story, which there's not. The idea of doing time travel was done really well just a couple of years before in the Turtles in Time video game, but in that video game, it's filled with the normal rogues gallery that you love from Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. In this movie, instead of using someone from this amazing rogues gallery, they go with generic British colonizer in feudal Japan. So instead of a good Ninja Turtles story, we get a bad feudal Japan movie with the Turtles thrown into it. But the most unforgivable thing about this movie for me is the horrendous underuse of Casey Jones and this awful wig that he's wearing. Like, did they pull it straight off of a mannequin in the ladies department? Why is Casey Jones's hair so brushed, groomed, and straight? Sorry, I may be focusing on the wrong details, but they take this tough vigilante, who's one of my favorite characters, if you didn't notice from my costume, and they make him babysit grown men for the entire runtime. Honestly, I could keep ranting about things about this movie that annoy me, but I'd rather move on to something better. In 5th place, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2014. Better's a bit of a relative term. Honestly, I'm not a hater of this film. I find it entirely watchable. I do not like watching Ninja Turtles 3. I'm totally fine to rewatch this film again. It gets a lot of things right, and it gets a lot of things wrong too. On the positive side, probably the most important thing you need to get right with a Ninja Turtles movie is the Turtles themselves. Obviously, and I think this movie did that. Their personalities match their personalities from previous versions. They have a camaraderie amongst them, but they also have conflict and rivalries. It feels right when they're interacting with one another.
Chill, it's just a mask. See? Don't freak out.
But the movie is just bogged down by a bunch of really, really bad ideas that feel like they came from an out-of-touch producer. Here I am. There's a bunch of ideas in this movie that no fan would ever greenlight. Just ask any fan, should the Ninja Turtles be April O'Neil's childhood pets? No. Should the Ninja Turtles be 7-foot-tall bodybuilders that are bulletproof? No. Should the Shredder be a 10-foot-tall transformer that shoots 10 blades out of his hands? No. Apparently they started filming and the plan was for Sax to be Shredder.
Not a great plan.
And then halfway through making the movie, they came to their senses, decided to hire a different guy to play Shredder, did reshoots, which are painfully obvious, to try and fix all of this. I mean, all of these are unbelievably and obviously bad ideas. This is what happens when producers want to turn every franchise into a modern day blockbuster, and therefore they just try and squish them through a specific template where bigger is always better and everyone has a deep rooted connection to everyone else in the story, and it makes everything seem so generic and ridiculous. Why is Shredder 10 feet tall and a robot? Because the Turtles are 7 feet tall, 400 pounds of pure muscle and bulletproof. No human could possibly be a threat to them. If you go back to 1990, why was that movie interesting? Because the Turtles were skilled but vulnerable. Raph can beat 4-foot soldiers, but he can't beat 40 of them.
I mean, come on. How do you guys expect to beat me? Good answer.
That's what made that movie interesting. Conflict, vulnerabilities being exploited, as opposed to what you have here, which is just trying to crank everything up louder and bigger to outdo everything else. I really do find this to be a very watchable film, just a frustrating one, because all of these mistakes were avoidable. They'd asked any fan, they could have told you, these decisions will sabotage the film. Number 4, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Out of the Shadows. This movie fixes a whole bunch of the mistakes made by the previous film, though it makes a bunch of new mistakes of its own. On the positive, it feels a lot more faithful tonally and with the characterizations to classic versions of the Turtles, in particular the 1987 cartoon. A lot of familiar faces show up, and it doesn't feel like our out-of-touch producer was trying to reinvent all of the characters. So it's just a lot of fun to see a pretty accurate version of Baxter Stockman, Krang, Bebop and Rocksteady, a better version of Shredder, and of course we get a new version of Casey Jones, though we'll talk more about that later. But that's also the problem here. To incorporate all of these characters into the plot, it becomes a disjointed, convoluted mess that's barely coherent at certain points in time. Like there's a sequence at the beginning of this movie where Baxter Stockman is trying to break Shredder out of prison in a convoy being driven by Casey Jones while he's with Bebop and Rocksteady, and the Ninja Turtles are trying to stop this from happening, and at the end of it, Shredder's transported to Krang. And then Krang doesn't show up in the movie until the third act. I mean, it's just hopping between characters in a way that's like, what? I don't really know what's going on here. And I'm not sure if they started filming without a complete script, or if they reworked the story in the editing room, or if characters were added via reshoots, but the movie feels very odd when it comes to the storytelling. But once again, the unforgivable mistake here is the misuse of Casey Jones. They cast Stephen Amell, who was a great choice at the time to play the character, but the way he's written and these goofy jokes that he's given,
Do not eat us.
just ruined the character. He's only given one real fight scene, and the whole thing was shown in the trailer. He only wears the mask in one scene, and so he just wasted a perfect opportunity. Once again, this is an entirely watchable film for me. The thing that nudges this one out over 2014 is just the novelty of seeing all of these characters in this film. It's just a little bit more fun. In third place, TMNT. It took me a while to come around to this movie. When it first came out, I was a cynical 20-something that just did not care about it at all. When I first watched it was actually just a few years ago, and I didn't have my kids with me. Just didn't leave much of a mark. But watching it during this nostalgic November with my kids, I actually liked it a good bit more. It actually has some pretty mature themes about the Turtles losing their way once they accomplish their purpose of stopping the Shredder. So it explores what happens to teams unified around a common goal when they accomplish that goal, and each of the different turtles respond in accordance with their personalities. Leonardo, the leader, he goes on this journey to try and discover how to be a better leader without knowing what that looks like. Raphael, the angry one that's the man of action, becomes a vigilante. The party dude decides to do parties in his free time, and Donatello gets a job working in tech. It feels true to the characters while having something to say about being lost and without purpose. Now, the main plot line about immortals and monsters and ancient civilizations and portals, not really my thing. Now, I understand Ninja Turtles gets very weird at times, but when it goes weird, I'm a classic kind of weird. I want Dimension X, Krang, Technodrome, not specifically what this movie offers. Likewise, it has a very domesticated Casey Jones. Granted, that fits into the theme of what happens when heroes don't have a villain anymore and they've accomplished their purpose. I don't mind the relationship with April. There's some nice touches in there, but I think they softened off a few too many edges. He wasn't quite gruff, sarcastic, wisecracking enough for my personal flavor, but I did appreciate that it's Chris Evans voicing him, so that's kind of a nice little touch. In general, a solid film with a lot of things to offer. I just wish it had a different central plot line. Our runner-up, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2, The Secret of the Ooze. This movie picks up right after the first film, but for the most part abandons the first film's tone and any plot points or characters that it didn't find useful, but somehow it really works for me. On paper, this movie's ridiculous. The Turtles use toys and sausages to attack enemies more than their weapons. Vanilla Ice shows up for a full concert.
You like what you saw?
Shredder is defeated by a keytar, but somehow it absolutely fits the movie that they were making and the tone that they were going for. I consider these like Taco Bell movies that aren't great cinema, but you find them very watchable. You can't defend what's going on, but you love it anyway. We all have those fast food places that don't make great food, but you never get tired of eating it, and that's what this movie is for me. It's cinematic fast food that I love. Now, Keno, as written, is no Casey Jones, but Ernie Reyes Jr., the actor playing him, is a lot of fun to watch.
Down we go.
He actually played one of the turtles in the suit in the first movie, so it's nice to get to see him in front of the camera without a costume this time. But all in all, this is a movie that I kind of love. But coming in at number 1 is Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles coming out of their shells. When I think of the classic concert documentaries, immediately coming out of their shells comes to mind. From the iconic classic songs that we're all still singing, to the fantastic costumes, this documentary gets everything right. Just kidding. This doesn't really qualify as a movie. That's really the only reason it's not number 1. But coming in at number 1 is Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 1990. This is one of the classic comic book movie adaptations, but it's rarely discussed in those terms, and it's about as good of a Ninja Turtles movie as you can make. It has a lot of the darker themes and elements of the comic books, like Casey Jones murdering Shredder with a whip. Oops! While having the lighthearted fun of the 1987 cartoon.
Awesome! Righteous! Bossa Nova!
From the very beginning, you care about the characters. Each of our turtles has a distinct personality and they respond to circumstances differently. As brothers, they have camaraderie, they have rivalries, they have conflict, and each of them has their own little arc that plays out throughout the film. It might be a story about turtles transformed by Ooze, but it never allows that to be an excuse to write hollow or thin characters. Their relationships are complex, and the events that happen in the story affect them as characters. They feel it. When Raph is injured and we're off at the O'Neill farm, it pauses to let us see how each of these characters interact to their first failure and having their family broken apart. Leonardo, the leader, takes responsibility for that and stays by his side. When Raph wakes up, Leonardo is excited.
Hey, he's awake! He wants some food! Bring some food!
And it's that vulnerability that elevates this film. And of course, we get the best Casey Jones ever. He's this unhinged vigilante who makes friends with the unhinged turtle. He's wisecracking, he's fun, he's violent at times, and he has a really nice dynamic with April. Like, I buy into the chemistry between the two of them, and it doesn't distract from everything else. It's just a nice spice in the story. Honestly, my only complaint about the movie is that the Shredder's costume looks like really bad cosplay. Besides that, it gets just about everything right, and as someone that took my 6-year-old daughter and 8-year-old son to go see this film, it holds up really well for all ages, so it comes in at number 1. If you've enjoyed this video, I've got way more like it. Check out that playlist right over there. If you've enjoyed this video, there's something else that I've done that you will love. Thank you so much for watching, and keep talking movies too much.